Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today, we're diving deep into Sinclair Lewis's It Can't Happen Here. It's a novel published back in 1935, but it feels eerily relevant even now. We'll unpack how Lewis portrays America on the verge of succumbing to a dictatorship and explore why this story continues to resonate almost a century later.
It's fascinating how Lewis sets the stage for this political thriller. He drops us right into the heart of the Great Depression. Breadlines, widespread unemployment, deep social unrest. This backdrop of economic hardship and simmering anxieties, well, it creates fertile ground for a figure like Buzz Windrip to emerge.
You can almost feel the desperation in the air.
Right.
Lewis introduces us to these forgotten men, everyday Americans hit hard by the Depression, they're yearning for change, and susceptible to Windrip's populist rhetoric. It makes you wonder, what makes someone like Windrip so appealing to the masses?
Windrip is a master of manipulation. He's this charismatic, folksy politician, spouts contradictory promises, and blatantly appeals to people's fears and prejudices. What's striking is how Lewis uses Windrip's background as a traveling medicine show performer to highlight the deceptive nature of charisma. It's all smoke and mirrors, yet people are drawn to his captivating persona.
It's like that saying, a con man can sell you anything if you want it badly enough. But it's not just Windrip's charm.
Right.
What specific tactics does he use to gain influence?
Lewis meticulously details how Windrip erodes democratic norms, and it doesn't happen overnight. He establishes a private militia called the Minutemen, using them to intimidate opponents and silence any dissenting voices. It's a chilling reminder of how easily violence can be used to suppress opposition.
A private militia. That sounds almost too fictional to be believable. But then again, we've seen how quickly things can escalate in times of uncertainty.
Exactly. And what's even more unsettling is how Windrip manipulates the media to control the narrative. Free speech is suppressed. Newspapers and radio stations become mouthpieces for his propaganda, and he effectively shuts down any channels of independent information. These are tactics we've witnessed time and again in authoritarian regimes throughout history.
So he's playing the classic dictator's game, controlling the information people have access to. But where does Doremus Jessup fit into all of this, the Vermont newspaper editor? He's watching this unfold from a front row seat, isn't he?
Yes. Doremus acts as our guide through this descent into authoritarianism. Initially, he dismisses Windrip as a harmless clown, almost amused by the absurdity of it all. But as Windrip's true colors become clear, Doremus's skepticism turns into alarm.
So he represents that gradual awakening, that moment when people realize, wait a minute, this is actually happening. But how does he respond to this unsettling realization? Does he simply watch from the sidelines? Or does he take action?
Doremus eventually chooses the path of resistance, joining the underground movement fighting against Windrip's regime. However, this resistance comes at a significant personal cost. Lewis doesn't shy away from depicting the brutality of concentration camps and the lengths to which Windrip goes to crush dissent.
It's a sobering reminder of the very real dangers that individuals face when they dare to challenge those in power. But it also highlights the courage and resilience of those who refuse to be silenced.
Absolutely. Lewis explores the moral dilemmas that people face when forced to choose between collaboration and resistance, a conflict that resonates throughout history. How far would you go to protect yourself and your loved ones in the face of such oppression? It's a question that Doremus, and by extension the reader, is forced to confront.
That's a question that goes to the heart of what it means to be human, to have a conscience, and to live in a society where such choices might be necessary. But before we delve further into Doremus's journey and the challenges of resistance, let's take a closer look at the character of Buzz Windrip.
Windrip is such a vividly drawn character, a caricature of a populist leader, but with a chilling realism that makes him all the more unsettling. Lewis gives us a glimpse into Windrip's past, painting him as a failed lawyer and a snake oil salesman, a background that becomes a powerful metaphor for his entire political career.
You're right. It's like he's peddling this political snake oil to a nation desperate for relief. He preys on people's anxieties and economic hardships, promising them simple solutions to complex problems. But how does he actually manage to convince so many people that he's the answer to their prayers?
Well, Windrip is a master manipulator. That much is clear. He promises everything to everyone: higher wages, lower prices, appealing to patriotism and traditional values, all while demonizing minorities and anyone who dares to oppose him. It's a playbook we've seen used repeatedly throughout history, the classic divide-and-conquer tactic.
It's frightening how effective those tactics can be, especially when people are feeling vulnerable and uncertain about the future. But what's interesting is how Lewis portrays Windrip's rise to power, It's not through a violent coup or some external force.
Right, exactly. What makes "it can't happen here" so unsettling is that Windrip is elected democratically. He manipulates the system from within. His supporters infiltrate the government and the military, gradually eroding democratic norms and suppressing dissent until a totalitarian state emerges.
That's what makes this book so thought-provoking. It's not about some foreign power taking over, but about a society willingly surrendering its freedoms to a charismatic leader who promises simple solutions to complex problems.
Precisely. Lewis repeatedly emphasizes that Windrip's supporters are often ordinary, well-meaning individuals who are seduced by his promises of stability and prosperity. They become complicit in their own oppression, blinded by their desire for a return to normalcy.
It's like that saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. But in the book, not everyone remains passive. Doremus, for example, chooses to actively resist. How does his journey unfold as this dystopian reality sets in? Does he fall victim to the regime, or does he find a way to fight back?
Well, that's where Doremus's true character shines through. He doesn't back down. He risks everything to oppose the regime and expose its lies, joining the underground resistance and jeopardizing his own safety and the safety of his loved ones.
It's a powerful testament to the human spirit that even in the darkest of times, there are those who refuse to surrender to tyranny. His story, though fictional, offers a glimpse into the real-life experiences of individuals who have lived under authoritarian regimes and risked their lives for freedom.
Absolutely. Doremus's struggles remind us that the fight for freedom is never truly over, and it requires constant vigilance, courage, and a willingness to stand up to those who would seek to erode our democratic values.
This deep dive is already proving incredibly insightful. Lewis's portrayal of the descent into tyranny is chillingly realistic, and his insights into the nature of power, the dangers of complacency, and the importance of resistance are as relevant today as they were back in 1935. But let's continue exploring this story.
Indeed. There's much more to uncover as we delve further into the complexities of Doremus's character, Windrip's reign, and the ultimate fate of democracy in Lewis's vision of America. One of the most striking things about Doremus is that he isn't some fearless, larger-than-life hero. He's an ordinary man, relatable and flawed, who finds himself thrust into extraordinary circumstances.
Yes, and at times, he seems more interested in escaping into literature than fully engaging with the political turmoil swirling around him.
That tendency to retreat into books is actually a crucial aspect of his character. Lewis uses Doremus's initial complacency, his intellectual detachment, to highlight the danger of remaining disengaged from the world around us. It's that head-in-the-sand mentality, that it can't happen here mindset that can blind us to the very real threats to our freedoms.
It makes you wonder, how many of us would react the same way? Would we recognize the warning signs, or would we be tempted to dismiss them as something outlandish, something that couldn't possibly happen in our own backyard?
That's what makes Doremus's transformation so compelling. He evolves from a passive observer to an active resistor, and his journey forces us to confront the question, what would we do in the same situation? Would we have the courage to stand up and fight for what we believe in, even when it means risking everything?
It's a question that goes to the core of our values, our sense of responsibility, and our commitment to the principles of democracy. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk more about the antagonist, Buzz Windrip. This character, this demagogue, is so vividly drawn. How does Lewis make him such a compelling, albeit terrifying, figure?
Windrip is a brilliant literary creation, a caricature of a populist leader, but with a chilling realism that makes him all the more unsettling. Lewis delves into Windrip's past, revealing him as a failed lawyer, a snake oil salesman, someone who thrives on deception and manipulation. This background becomes a powerful metaphor for his entire political career. He's essentially peddling a political snake oil to a nation hungry for change and desperate for easy answers.
I remember that detail about his past, how he even led a traveling medicine show, promising miracle cures for all sorts of ailments. It's almost comical, yet deeply disturbing at the same time.
Exactly. And that's the brilliance of Lewis's portrayal. He blends humor and satire with a chilling dose of reality. To expose the dangers of falling prey to such charismatic figures, Windrip preys on people's fears and anxieties, their economic hardships, offering them empty promises and scapegoats to blame for their problems.
And the scary part is, it works. He manages to convince a significant portion of the population that he's the answer to their prayers, even though his solutions are based on lies, fear-mongering, and a blatant disregard for democratic principles.
What's particularly unsettling is how Lewis describes Windrip's rhetoric. His speeches are filled with empty slogans, contradictions, and appeals to emotion rather than reason. He's a master of doublespeak, tailoring his message to different groups with conflicting promises, all the while eroding trust in established institutions and sowing division among the people.
It's a tactic that we've seen used time and again throughout history, and it's as effective today as it was back then. But I'm curious, in the book, how does Windrip actually come to power? Is it through a violent coup, a rigged election, or something else entirely?
That's what makes the novel so disturbingly relevant. Windrip is elected democratically. He manipulates the system from within. His supporters infiltrate government institutions, the military, law enforcement. They sow chaos, undermine public trust, and gradually chip away at democratic norms until a totalitarian state takes hold.
It's a chilling reminder that the erosion of democracy often happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, until it's too late to turn back. It's not about some external force taking over, but about a society willingly surrendering its freedoms, often unknowingly, to a charismatic leader who promises them a return to greatness.
And what's even more unsettling is how Lewis portrays Windrip's supporters. They aren't all extremists or fringe groups. Many are ordinary, well-meaning people who are seduced by his promises of stability and prosperity. They become complicit in their own oppression, blinded by their desire for simple solutions to complex problems.
That's what makes the book so powerful. It holds up a mirror to society, forcing us to confront our own vulnerabilities and the ways in which we might be susceptible to such rhetoric. It's a reminder that the fight for freedom requires constant vigilance, critical thinking, and a willingness to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient.
Absolutely, and it highlights the danger of complacency, the idea that it can't happen here. Because as Lewis so brilliantly demonstrates, it can. The seeds of tyranny can take root anywhere, in any society, if we allow fear, division, and apathy to take hold.
It's a sobering thought, but an essential one to grapple with. Now, we've talked about Windrip's rise to power, Doremus's decision to join the resistance, but there's another twist in the story, isn't there? What ultimately happens to Windrip and his reign of terror?
Well, that's where Lewis injects a bit of dark humor, perhaps even a touch of irony, into the narrative. Windrip, the seemingly all-powerful dictator, is overthrown, not by the resistance, but by his own advisor, the cunning and even more ruthless Lee Saracen.
Wow. So he gets a taste of his own medicine, betrayed by his own inner circle. It makes you wonder, is that the inevitable fate of all dictators?
It certainly highlights the precarious nature of power, and the fact that even those who seem invincible are often vulnerable to those closest to them. But Saracen's rise to power also serves another purpose. He represents a different kind of tyrant, one who is cold, calculating, and even more insidious than Windrip.
It's like trading one monster for another, but perhaps an even more terrifying one.
Precisely. And this turn of events underscores a crucial theme that runs throughout the novel, the cyclical nature of power. One dictator falls, another rises. It's a sobering reflection on the human tendency towards authoritarianism. Regardless of who's at the helm, it's a constant battle between freedom and tyranny, a battle that requires constant vigilance and a willingness to resist those who would seek to control us.
It's a reminder that the fight for freedom is never truly over. It's an ongoing struggle, a continuous process of safeguarding our rights, holding those in power accountable, and ensuring that the voices of dissent are never silenced. But before we delve further into Saracen's regime and Doremus's continued resistance, let's take a step back and consider the broader context of the novel.
You're right. It's important to remember that Lewis wrote It Can't Happen Here in 1935, a time when fascism was on the rise in Europe, and the world was grappling with the aftermath of the Great Depression.
It was a time of immense uncertainty and fear, a time when many people were questioning the very foundations of democracy and wondering if a similar fate awaited their own nation.
Exactly. And Lewis, a keen observer of social and political trends, was deeply concerned about the potential for such ideologies to take root in America. He saw the warning signs, the growing appeal of demagoguery, the erosion of trust in institutions, the willingness to embrace simplistic solutions to complex problems.
So the novel wasn't just a work of fiction. It was a warning, a call to action, a plea for vigilance in the face of growing threats to democratic values.
Precisely. And that's why it continues to resonate today. The themes it explores, the dangers it exposes, the questions it raises are as relevant now as they were nearly a century ago.
It's a stark reminder that the fight for freedom is a timeless one, a struggle that each generation must undertake anew.
And it's a testament to the power of literature to serve as a mirror to society, reflecting our vulnerabilities, challenging our assumptions, and inspiring us to action.
Now, Let's shift our focus back to Doremus and his experience under Saracen's even more oppressive regime. How does he navigate this new reality, this intensified atmosphere of fear and surveillance?
Doremus' struggle intensifies under Saracen's rule. He's forced to go deeper underground, living a clandestine existence, constantly on the run from the ever-watchful eyes of the Corpo state. He endures imprisonment, witnesses the horrors of concentration camps, and experiences firsthand the brutality of a regime that seeks to crush any form of dissent.
It's a stark depiction of the personal cost of resistance, the sacrifices that individuals are often forced to make when they stand up against tyranny. But through it all, Doremus never gives up, does he?
That's right. He finds a way to keep fighting, drawing strength from his convictions, his belief in freedom, and knowledge that he's not alone in his struggle.
It's a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, the unyielding desire for freedom that burns even in the darkest of times.
Absolutely. And Doremus's journey underscores a crucial message that runs throughout the novel. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, even when hope seems lost, resistance is never futile.
It's a powerful message,
Yeah.
one that resonates with anyone who has ever fought for a cause they believed in, who has stood up against injustice, or who has dared to dream of a better world.
And it's a reminder that the fight for freedom is often a long and arduous one, a battle that requires patience, perseverance, and an unwavering belief in the possibility of change.
But let's be honest, it's a question that lingers in the back of our minds as we read the novel. Does the resistance ultimately succeed? Does Doremus and his fellow freedom fighters manage to overthrow Saracen and restore democracy to America?
Well, that's where Lewis leaves us with a bit of a cliffhanger.
You're kidding. He doesn't give us a definitive answer.
He does not. The novel ends with Doremus still fighting, still clinging to hope. But the outcome remains uncertain. It's not a triumphant ending, but a reminder that the fight for freedom is a continuous process, an ongoing struggle that requires constant vigilance, and a willingness to never give up. It's a deliberate choice on Lewis's part, leaving the ending open-ended.
I can see how that would be frustrating for some readers, wanting a clear resolution.
It might be frustrating, but it's also incredibly powerful. It forces us to confront the reality that the fight for freedom is never truly over. It's an ongoing struggle that requires constant vigilance, a willingness to stand up and resist those who would seek to erode our rights, to silence our voices, to control our lives.
So it's not a story with a neat and tidy ending, but rather a call to action, a reminder that democracy is fragile, that it requires constant nurturing and protection.
Precisely. Lewis's message is clear. It can happen here, and it can happen anywhere. The seeds of tyranny can take root in any society, regardless of its history, its traditions, its claims to exceptionalism. It's a warning that resonates deeply, especially in times like these, when we see the rise of populism, nationalism, and authoritarian tendencies in various parts of the world.
It makes you wonder, what would it take for us to recognize the warning signs, to resist the allure of simple solutions, to stand up and defend the principles of democracy before it's too late?
That's the question that Lewis wants us to grapple with. He's not providing easy answers, but he's forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about our society, about the fragility of the systems we often take for granted.
It's a challenge to our complacency, to our tendency to think, it can't happen here, but as Lewis so powerfully demonstrates, it can. And it's up to each of us to ensure that it doesn't.
This deep dive has been an incredibly insightful journey through Lewis's prescient novel. It's a book that should be read and reread, discussed and debated, because its message is timeless, its warnings are urgent, and its insights into the human condition are as relevant today as they were nearly a century ago.
I couldn't agree more. It's a book that stays with you long after you've finished reading it, prompting reflection, challenging assumptions, and perhaps even inspiring action. If you'd like to delve deeper into this thought-provoking novel, you can purchase it using the link in the show notes. And be sure to subscribe to Mindful Moments for more insightful book analyses. Until next time, keep those minds sharp, stay engaged, and remember, the fight for freedom is a story that never ends.
Well said.